Hi, I'm Charlie Mato-Toyela with Blue Bear Flutes, and of course here on our website, bluebearflutes.com, as well as on YouTube, if that's where you're viewing this video at. You can find us under Blue Bear Flutes, as well as our Instagram and so many other places. Today is lesson number 3 of our 12-week beginning to intermediate level Native American How to Play the Native American Flute video series, and today's lesson is about how to practice effectively. It's something that I try to hit on each and every lesson, and in this particular lesson it's certainly no different, but we're going to go over a few more advanced techniques, as well as talk about something that I promised in the last class, showing you my 4-hole flute, which is part of today's lessons and techniques. I think will help you out quite a bit. So the first thing, if I can ask you, if you're physically capable of it, and if you're not, I understand. If you don't feel like it, that's another story. Sometimes you need to kind of follow along with this protocol if you feel like it or not. But if you could, take your flute in hand if you have one already. If you don't, feel free to sit here and watch through this video. Practice effectively means that you have to practice everything the way that you're going to perform it, is what I've always told my children, who are all musicians and performers. However you practice is however you perform. So make sure that you practice the way that you plan on performing. So if you would, at this time, sit up straight. Try your best to breathe through your nose. I know it's kind of difficult at times, especially during pollen season here in the south of the United States where I live. But take your flute in hand, cover all the holes. This is a technique you should do every single time you pick up your flute. If you have a modern 6-hole flute that has a fingering that your flute maker has told you to keep that hole covered, or if it has something covering it already, a plug, a tie of leather, piece of tape, whatever you've got, leave that one covered. The lessons that we have here on Blue Bear Flutes 12-week beginning to intermediate level course is something that will work with that flute as well as our 5-hole flutes, and honestly really just about any kind of Native American flute. Keep that hole covered all the time, preferably with something so that you don't get confused about lifting your finger off of it, because that can become confusing. My philosophy on whether that hole is made for someone who is an advanced flute player or not is something we'll talk about in a few moments when we get into other types of flutes. And so hold this flute in your hands, not even putting it to my mouth right now. Cover all the holes. Before you place the mouthpiece against your lips, uncover the holes. And the reason we do this is because the easiest note to play is all holes uncovered. When you have all holes uncovered, it makes the highest note. And that highest note is usually the easiest note to play. Now, all holes uncovered, unless you're playing that modern 6-hole flute that needs this hole covered. Do something about that. But after you play that note, then cover the next one. Cover the next one. Now, on our last lesson, we've gone over something called vibrato, which is where you're making that little. You can add as much or as little vibrato on that as you like. I do have other videos on our YouTube channel on how to do this. And of course, the lesson itself should have given you some idea of how to cause that vibrato to happen. But if you notice, when I play a note, I have a tendency to play long, drawn-out notes with just a little bit of vibrato. Sometimes I add a little, sometimes I add less, sometimes I add more. You know, it just depends on what the feeling is I'm trying to convey. And once you get to that bottom note, feel free to go back up the scale. If you are a beginner or even an intermediate Native American flute player, or honestly any kind of flute or other instrument player, learning the basic scale of your instrument is what's going to help you on so many levels. Not mentally thinking, I know how to play this scale, but teaching your hands where those notes are. This is called athletic memory. It's like when you catch a baseball, you learn exactly how to catch that baseball. Or when you practice martial arts, you learn exactly where to punch. And after practicing that same move several times, you get really good at it. With the Native American flute, there again, any instrument, but the Native American flute we're here for, once your fingers know exactly where those holes are and how to place them properly, you'll find that a lot of times your fingers play the flute for you, and all you have to do is supply the air. So likewise, some of the techniques that we went over on the first week of class were the tonguing or pronunciation techniques. And if you'll notice, when I'm practicing, I try to throw some of those in there. It's a good habit to get into. And it's also a good habit, like I said, to sit up straight, to try to breathe through your nose. There again, unless you're congested or for some other reason can't breathe through your nose, but take in as much air as you can. And then breathe. Remembering to breathe is the hardest part, but it's easy to forget and think, oh, I'll just go ahead and breathe now. But if you'll practice breathing, then breathing is very important, and it's a big part of how you play a wind instrument, since it's what plays your wind instrument. Anyway, today's lesson is on practicing effectively, and as promised, I'm going to go over a few other instruments. I do want to make sure that you know actually, I'm sorry, I think today's the lesson we go over that vibrato, not the last one, so I was getting ahead of myself in my notes. We're going to use some different fingering techniques, things that I call my alien techniques. I know I mentioned that in the last lesson, in lesson 2, and we'll go over those. We'll also go over what to do if you're starting to get burnt out. So, and then of course vibrato, which is the other main focus. I've even got it underlined on my notes there, so it's the only thing that's underlined coincidentally, and I mentioned it was for last week, but as human as I try to be, sometimes I am only that. To start with, I guess we'll go over these couple of fingering techniques that I like. This is the 2-finger and the 3-finger technique. These are very simple techniques. This is a 4-hole flute. 4-hole flutes have been around in Native American culture since before 5 and since before 6-hole flutes that we know. Mathematically, it kind of makes sense. Before you can drill 6 holes, unless you have a machine that drills all 6 holes at once, you have to drill 4 holes. And before you can drill 5, the same. So the 4-hole flutes typically stuck around for a while. People played them for a long time and thought, hey, this is great. And honestly, they are very great. Plays the same amount of notes that my 5-hole flutes, 6-hole flutes, and that the modern 6-hole flute plays all of those same exact notes. And just like any of those flutes, you have different fingering techniques to learn how to play different scales. We'll go over 2 lessons from now, the major scale, which the major scale is not really a Native American sounding scale. If you want to say that, it doesn't sound like most common Native American flute music today, and your flute isn't made specifically to play that. It is kind of like a side effect of having the ability to reason and come up with these things yourself. So the major scale, of course, hasn't been around as long as a minor pentatonic scale has in history. And likewise, like I say, our flutes, being a little bit older nature, are ones that are made in minor pentatonic scales. So this 4-hole flute, I'm not here to teach you how to play these today. I have videos on that. But it plays the basic same way. You uncover all the holes, and when you cover them all up, you can play the low note or the high note. Typically, most 4, 5, and 6-hole flutes do the same thing. If you blow a little faster, they'll jump octave. If you find that your flute is jumping octave randomly, it's probably because you haven't learned breath control yet, and that's, takes time. Practice blowing softly, blow slowly. Take your time, is so important. But what we're using this for today is my 2- and 3-finger technique, that I like to call it, or my alien technique. This flute here plays with 2 fingers on one hand if you are so designed, and 2 fingers on this hand if you're able to. Back in the old days, I'm pretty sure that most Native people played them with one hand. Our dexterity is not quite what it used to be thousands of years ago, in my opinion, and for that reason I believe that it's probably easier to play it like this, and hence my alien technique, I like to call it. So using the 2 fingers on this hand, 2 fingers on this hand, you play the flute like that. When I first started playing this type of flute, it was mind-opening to me, and that's why I'm sharing this in this video. Playing the flute using these two-finger techniques gives it a new depth. It gives it a new approach, a different way that you can look at things. It's not something that you have to really think, what am I going to do next? So if you'll watch my fingers, that's actually a progression in the music terms, but what I'm doing is I'm uncovering two holes. And then I'm only going to uncover one. This would actually be the same thing that would happen if you only had one finger here to play these notes, one fingering that played the same sound. And you noticed on that last way back down, I switched it up and played one note and then one note. So the two-finger technique is actually, to break it down for you, is just simply a way that you can remember what to do next, which is all about what this music has to do with. What do you do next? How do you come up with the next sound, the next phrase, the next part of what it is that you're wanting to express? That's taking two fingers off at one time. It's that simple. I mean, this is not it's not rocket science. And it doesn't have to be those two fingers. If you notice, I took two fingers off. Took two fingers off. It is so easy. You can switch this up just on a moment's notice. It's not a very difficult technique at all. This is honestly baby talk in the world of music. It is so easy if you're covering all the holes. If you notice in both of those parts of this little phrase I just created, I randomly took different sets of two fingers off at one time. That's what this two-finger technique is. It works going back down the scale as well. It's easier when the two fingers are on the same hand, but when you play them when they're not on the same hand, it still has the same exact effect. Don't think that you have to continue using the two fingers. This technique, though it seems very simple, and it is easy to master, I promise you, but once you get it under control, once you realize what it's doing, once you realize the mathematical shortcut that you're taking from, and forgive me for using the word evolving. I don't mean evolving like, we started off as some other animal and turned into this. I'm talking about in the history of mankind. Our math was incredibly complex 10,000 years ago. Unbelievably so. Octagonal math and math based on numbers without a zero until Native Americans were the first people to come up with a zero. And when I say our, I mean the world. Sumer, ancient Egypt, ancient Greece, all over the world, everywhere, and ancient Asian countries that had mathematical equations, the likes of which most of us ponder and scratch our head at today. Native Americans, as I mentioned, come up with the number zero. Those things are behind us now, and whether we have a link to those or we have to spend all of our life learning how to add and subtract, our math used to be a lot more complicated, in my opinion, than it is today, or at least for the general people. With regards to what we're doing here, we're taking mathematical shortcuts. These are equations that somebody else wrote out. I'm helping you learn them. So this equation here, simple stuff, take two fingers off. It's baby steps, honestly, but it's the easiest thing in the world. Take two fingers off. It doesn't matter which two, as long as they're in order. Now, you don't want to take these two fingers off and keep these covered up. So you want to always go in order of the progression of the scale. You don't want to go or you don't want to do any of that. Not yet. That's still more advanced. But as you're playing the scale, when you're taking a finger off here, take the next 2 off. Or if you took these 3 off already, take the next 2 off. If you're covering them back up, cover 2 up. Don't always do the same thing either. That's another really important technique, is try not to repeat everything. Sometimes repeating a little bit is great. It gives your viewer, your listener, it gives yourself an idea of what the whole thing is coming out. It's a chorus in music. You know, repeating a little bit, a concentration, an idea, something that you're focused on. Repeating that is great, but don't always take 2 fingers off. You know, this is just a technique. This is like playing the staccato. It'd get very boring if that's the way you played every day and that's the only thing you played. So don't always take 2 fingers off. This is a little bag, or a little technique to go in your bag of tricks, if you would. So the 2-finger technique I learned from learning how to play an even more ancient flute is very important. And then likewise, there's also a 3-finger technique. The 3-finger technique, just like the 2-finger technique, don't practice it yet. 2 fingers first, okay? Baby steps. So 3 fingers at a time does something. It really does. See, I took those 3 fingers off. I didn't want to start off on the bottom to make you think that you always have to start on the bottom. You see what I did? I started off by uncovering 3, and then I uncovered 1, and then I uncovered the next 3, and then I uncovered one more, and then I uncovered the next 3. I mean, it's a simple technique. It is so easy. Once again, this is the equation that somebody who's been playing for a long time has learned to help you practice, really. You know, like I said, your mind is going to create the music you need to listen to and that other people need to hear. But this is a technique that you can use. Uncover 2 fingers at a time, cover them back up. Uncover 3 fingers at a time, covering 2 back up. You know, uncover 1 finger, uncover 2. It's so simple. It's like one of those old how to dance routines that they used to draw out and show you pictures of your feet. This is how the person who wrote those dance routines thought. So, FYI, I hope that makes some sense. So, see, I covered 2 up. Now let's practice vibrato, since I didn't include it in last week's lesson, obviously. Vibrato is an air pressure control and release. Control and release. And vibrato is very simple. It is basically going. I know you can hear a little bit of that coming across. I'm blowing a puff of air and continue blowing, and then blow another puff of air. It's that simple. If that's, you know, if you really need to learn how to do vibrato and you haven't figured it out by the end of this lesson, come back, rewind, and practice blowing puffs of air. And the more control you have on that puff of air, the more elaborate the vibrato can be. So listen, this is an example of me blowing puffs of air like I was just showing you. To me, that's a very strong, powerful vibrato. That's a little much. That's a slow version of the same thing. I'm blowing more air when I blow through more air. So I'm blowing, continue blowing, more air, continue blowing, more air. That's how this goes. And then this is a delayed vibrato. And I'm using kind of my diaphragm. I'm using just control of my air. A little bit of my throat maybe is helping to control this. It's all blending together. But if you use the technique to learn by blowing puffs of air, you'll get it in no time. It's the easiest thing. The vibrato is probably the most commonly used technique in Native American flute playing, and definitely one of the very most important ones, I'd say, to express an idea. So. And that's so slow you can't even tell it's vibrato. You think I'm making new sounds is what I'm doing. So you can use vibrato on any note. It doesn't have to be the landing note like I was showing you at the beginning of the lesson. It can be, and you can go fast or you can go slow. I've heard people just go lightning fast with a vibrato. Does that mean that's the way you need to do it? Not necessarily. It may not be conveying the idea that you're trying to come up with, that you're trying to show. So the vibrato is something that you can really lead into. You can grow up to it, I guess you would say. You can grow into it, really is what it is, because after this video you should have vibrato pretty well, at least the idea of how to do it, pretty well down. And although a lot of times I'll play that bottom note or the ending note of a song or a phrase. I'll play that ending note or landing note, the last note you play or whatever you want to call it. I'll play that and add vibrato. But if you notice that last part, and if you didn't notice, go back and rewind that again. Like I say, go back and listen to that. The last part, I didn't play the bottom note with the vibrato. The reason I didn't do it is because one of the key really key factors in making your music sound good, whether it's Native American flute music or guitar, trombone, xylophone, the Mongolian erhu, or whatever it is you're playing, or even singing. You know, I've heard so many singers that sing with this operatic vibrato on every single sound that they sing, and it's overwhelming to me. It makes it difficult for me to enjoy it so much when they do it on every single sound, and I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. Not putting you down if that's the way you sing. More power to you. You know, how you express yourself is only for you. The rest of us, if we enjoy it, we do. If we don't, we don't. That's once again on us. But with the flute, my suggestion is to shake things up a little bit. Don't always do the exact same thing. Use the amount of vibrato that you think is necessary. No more, no less. You know, and if you think maybe I did too much, don't do so much the next time, you know, and it really makes a difference. So notice that I didn't always do it on a landing note, but typically, because vibrato is kind of a lengthy technique to get across, it's not something that you can it's not something you always want to play fast. So you can, but you don't have to. And this next part of the lesson is just to show any of you who have been playing the modern 6-hole flute, I call it, the one that you're supposed to keep covered all the time. If you're curious why it is, after my first 3 lessons here, that I keep calling that the modern 6-hole flute, this one is based on the original Native American 6-hole flutes. You know, and this one, honestly, even though it's large, still used the original fingering pattern from a 5-hole flute that was a historic example. So this one is using the historic example of that 6-hole flute. The inside diameter is a little bit large, and I know that you're thinking after looking at the flute this size, that's actually quite small, and it is in comparison. However, originally, most Native American flutes, because of the materials on hand, this is a piece of river cane here, it's pretty small. There are larger species of river cane. People usually didn't make flutes out of them. They were really tore up for making baskets though. So we went into some river cane patches and just shredded them to make baskets or you know, furniture, clothing, you know, whatever you needed out of it. I mean, that river cane is pretty handy. This diameter is so small that my finger barely fits inside of it. This flute is a original design 6-hole flute where you don't keep that finger covered to play the note in the scale. And so a lot of people, in my opinion, have been very confused about how to make 6-hole flutes. And I've got videos on that, by the way. So if you're wondering what I'm talking about, we've got in-depth videos. But just so that I'm not teaching you something that is not provable here. This is a flute design based on the original 6-hole Native American flutes. It's naturally in a minor pentatonic scale. And there are so many people who have taught so many other ideas about this. I believe wholeheartedly this is the way that this flute was originally designed to play. I have smaller ones and some I'll be playing in upcoming videos. However, this is based historically on the size, shape, fingering pattern, and everything exactly as it should be. So just to let you know, until you get to that note, it's basically a 5-hole flute. This note is just the next note in the scale, which you can also play on a 5-hole flute or the 4-hole flute. And this. And likewise, you can play. You can play another note in the scale, which you can also play, you know, I'm telling you, apples and apples. It's harder to play on a large flute. However, there's so many different kinds of flutes in the world. And of course, so many kinds of Native American flutes in the world. Here's a PVC one I made in another video. If you want to make your own flute and you don't have one on hand, this flute here cost me about $1 something to make. So I've got videos on how to do that. Even simpler than that, honestly. But when you're playing one of these flutes, like I say, this type, you learn from the flute maker that is not the type that you cover up that hole while you're playing it to play the scale properly. This type, if you had a 6-hole flute that was made like that, then it would be the type that you would have to cover that hole all the time. And it has to do with the diameter of the flute and changing the pattern to fit the needs and that kind of thing. So today's lesson about how to practice effectively, there are so many things about practicing effectively that are important. One thing is don't get burnt out. Burnt out is when you've been playing and playing and playing, your hands get sore. My hands get sore from making flutes, I'll tell you. But even when you're just playing the flute, this is something new. And I had mentioned athletic memory just a minute ago. Athletic memory is kind of telling you this is actually, I mean, I'm not saying you're going to run a relay race after you learn how to play the flute, but this is a athletic process. It's learning to place your fingers, and you're doing a lot of things with your fingers. So if you start to get sore, take a break. If one day doesn't fix it, take 2 days. You know, I've been doing weightlifting for a little while in my life in these last few years of everything we've been doing here recently. And I've learned that if I don't take a break, I'll get not just burnt out, but it doesn't help me as much. So I learned taking a break helps you quite a bit. It really does. So take a break. If you get mentally burnt out and you're like, oh gosh, I'm never going to get this. I'm never going to play. I'm not going to ever learn how to do that. Don't say that. That's not true. You can learn this. This is such an easy instrument. Honestly, it is the easiest instrument in the entire world to learn how to play. You will get there. You'll get there and beyond more than likely. Because once you've been playing for a while, you think, oh, this is great. This is amazing stuff. You have to keep it fresh. And for me, that's helping others learn how to play. That's how I like to keep it fresh. So you'll get there. Take your time. Practice. Practice is one other technique for learning to really become a great flute player. Practicing effectively means doing the thing that works and doing it well, and sometimes switching it up, like I mentioned with the 2- and 3-hole finger technique. Switch it up. That's important. One thing that will help you, most importantly, not get burnt out, and this is the silliest thing, I know it is, and especially I've got friends that are like in situations where they can't do some of this, but even at that level, they found ways to do that. Location. And I left a silence there for a minute so you can think about that. Location. Playing in front of a black screen, you know, is not the location that I enjoy playing in front of. Maybe it is. But for you as a beginner or intermediate Native American flute player, or even if you're an advanced flute player, you just want to watch back over these videos to see what it is that maybe some new idea that you might need to get. And I promise you, I try to put out ideas that cover advanced techniques as well. But if you are in the wrong place when you're playing, sometimes you'll get burnt out. And what is the right place? That's honestly for you to decide. You've got some idea, some kind of preconception of what this flute is supposed to sound like. Otherwise, you wouldn't have bought one, you wouldn't have made one, you wouldn't be interested in watching this video right now. So you've got some kind of preconceived idea of what it's supposed to sound like. In that idea, you know, I'm going to tell you right now, you also think of where it should be played. And if you go there and play it, I'm going to tell you right now too, oh my gosh, I got to stop. Playing by the waterfalls may not be the best thing to do. You might slip on the rocks for one thing, and that ends your playing career. So please, wherever you play, please be careful. Playing in front of a snake pit, you know, if that's your thing, go for it. But I'm not telling you to do that, because I would not play in a pit of snakes. Okay, that's not me. But if playing somewhere that gives you an acoustic echo sound, that little bit of extra sound, and I'm trying to speak up and modulate my voice so that you can hear the tone of this room I'm in. As a musician, as an instrument maker, and just, I don't know why else, but maybe just being me, I hear the shape of the room I'm in when I come into a room. I hear the distractive things on the wall. If you see the darkness coming over my face a little bit, there's a light here, and that light has a like an umbrella behind it that's a reflective. It's part of making videos, but I can actually, I don't hear the shape of this design, but I can hear that it's there. If you're in a room that is carpeted, in the music industry, in recording music, there's a setting on my recording equipment to change whether or not the sound, and we're not using that equipment right now, by the way, we're just flat straight recording this. But in the recording industry, I can take out or add in carpet into my room that I'm trying to make my sound come through as. And if you don't want to go out and spend thousands of dollars and waste a lot of your time learning how to, and it's not a waste if you've got a reason to do it, but if you're just doing it to enjoy the echo sound, all you have to do is walk over to a wall that doesn't have anything on it, into a corner, somewhere that's got straight edges, somewhere preferably without any paintings hanging on the wall, no tapestries, no major, physical things that are kind of in your way, and the echo will actually come back to you. So if you have to do that in a room, there's a place that you can get some echo. You can do it in a canyon. I'm not telling you to do this in a canyon because it may not be safe for whatever reason to go outdoors even at this point in life. But if you can go somewhere that has an acoustic echo, one of my favorite places, and I've ever done this at, and I've got a video on it. I don't remember if it was on Instagram or on YouTube, but I recorded a video of me playing at the Botanical Gardens in Atlanta, Georgia. Okay, that's not where I live, but it's one of my favorite places I've ever played personally. They had a bridge there. I'm not even looking at the flowers at this point, although it was beautiful. It really was, and they do a great job. But they had a bridge there, and under the bridge was like, I don't remember, there might have been graffiti or something, but it was a neat place. It was really unique. And the echo, the acoustics under that bridge, because it was open on both sides, but it had these straight, very dense material, hard walls, was incredible, and I'll never forget it. I always like to mention Weird Al Yankovic, one of my favorite musicians and a really, really cool dude, recorded, as he says, one of his first albums, if not the first album, in a bathroom. I think it was like his college dorm bathroom, because there were flat tile or cement walls in there, and there was no fixtures, there were no paintings hanging up, nothing that could absorb any of that sound. And that is why I think it was the bus song. I can't remember. Like I love Weird Al's music and what have you, but I always forget. It's like riding the bus or whatever. But anyway, that song they put out had that kind of neat echo to it. And myself, I've done. I mean, none of us are far behind that. We all try to do something different. But going in that bathroom, it was like I've gone into one of the local gym here recently and done that. And the sound is amazing. It's really incredible. Now, if you are part of a gym and they'll let you go in and play it, like I said, you have to ask permission sometimes, or even if if you're in the concept that I'm probably okay to go do this, whatever you do, you'll hear it. You'll hear what I'm talking about. So where you're at, your location is important. If you're not looking for the echo sound and you want to be in nature, my youth, I grew up sitting out in the woods, sitting in a boat, where I grew up at, and I kid you not, birds have always landed on me. I've had a huge hawk land on the bow of my boat before in life. You know, and I love snakes, to be honest with you. I know they're not safe, but, and I mentioned a minute ago, I wouldn't sit down in front of them just because I love them. You know, I like sharks too. I wouldn't take one out to dinner. But anyway, where you're at, what it is that inspires you, that's important. That inspiration is what has led you here, and that inspiration is what you need to follow in order to get what you're looking for. Now, if that means that you need to go play this flute on a canyon, please be careful. If you're that snake charmer, please be careful. I've watched y'all, very talented folks. Please be careful. So location, sound quality, those things are part of practicing effectively, and don't get burnt out. You know, burnout is a terrible thing. You know, if you get burnt out, set it down. It's okay. It'll be right there waiting for you. Set it somewhere you'll see it every day. You'll think to yourself, I really need to play that flute. So anyway, I hope this video has helped you all learn a little bit of technique, and also helped you learn some interesting things about the Native American flute, especially the 6-hole flutes here and how I perceive that they were original. I've been making them for a while, 33 years right now at this particular point. The next lesson, the week 4 lesson of our class, is Parts Unknown. It's the song number 2 on the beginning to intermediate level flute playing lessons that I have here. And Parts Unknown is made out of just that, parts unknown. And you guys will see what I'm talking about on that lesson. It's going to be a lot of fun. And speaking of burnout, if you are a intermediate level flute player and you've been a little bit burnt out and feeling like I'm not sure what I'm going to do next, I don't know how to come up with something new, and really if you've gotten this far and I haven't taught you something new, that next lesson is specifically for you. It's going to show you how to write your own music, how to do it simply and easily and incredibly effectively. If you haven't yet, please go back over the last videos, because they will focus on techniques, phrasing, you know, the jumping bird technique we did in the last lesson, slurs, this week's 2- and 3-hole finger techniques, as well as vibrato, which is what everybody wants to learn how to do on the flute, the vibrato. And I hope that I made that simple enough for you. We do have other videos on this on our YouTube channel, Blue Bear Flutes, also upcoming videos on the same thing to help you get that technique ahead. But learning how to write your own music is so very important. And you know, even if you're not going to write music, it's still how you're going to come up with the next thing. So remember to do that. Remember to sit up straight. Remember to breathe and use everything that you have learned, and don't stop learning. So once again, Charlie Mato-Toyela signing out for Blue Bear Flutes. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Look forward to seeing you again very soon, and happy flute playing.